Welcome to the online hand building class. Thank you for joining me. I'm really excited about all these videos and I look forward to seeing your creations. For our first class, we're going to be making the pinch pot nesting bowls. So what you'll need to have ready is your clay, a towel for your workspace, a sponge for cleanup, and your hands as the tools. If you want to gather some optional tools, you can have a placemat available, a paper clip, some found textures from around the house, or you can go on a nature hike and pick up some nuts or leaves or something you can put an impression with in your clay, and a bowl of water. Thank you for joining me for the online hand building session. This is our first video and we are going to be creating a set of 3 nesting bowls. And as you can see, I have my towel out. I'm at my dedicated workspace. I really want to make sure that I keep dust out of my house. So after I'm done, I can roll up my towel and put it in the laundry, and then also clean my workspace with a wet sponge and wash my hands. So you're going to get your clay that you picked up from the studio, and we are going to first make our 3 ball sizes that we need to make our bowls. Excuse me. And forgive me, I'm new at all this videoing, so bear with all the little hiccups. Hopefully it'll get better each one that we do. So I know a lot of us don't have a scale at home, and we're trying to use things that we have in our house and our hands. So I tried to make these clay balls in like relationship to fruit that we're all familiar with. So your first size is going to be the size of a mandarin orange, and if you have a scale, it will be about half a pound. Your second size is going to be the size of, let's say, peach. If you have a kitchen scale and you want to use it, that's about 3/4 of a pound. And then our last ball will be about the size of an apple, and the weight on that is about a pound. So I'm gonna start with my smallest size first. So you can go ahead and put the other balls that you made back in your bag just so they don't get dried out. And what you want to do is just try to make this into a nice round shape before you even start with the pinch pot part. And if you want to, you can roll it around on your tabletop. If you happen to have like a old placemat, plastic placemat, you can use that for like a solid surface if you don't want to do it on your cloth or directly on the tabletop. Or you can just roll it in your hands. Then after I get my ball nice and round, it doesn't have to be smooth. You know, if you want to, you can smooth it out, but it's not necessary. Then I'm gonna hold the ball in my hand and start doing my pinch pot. So with a pinch pot, you use your thumb and you push your thumb directly into the center of your ball of clay. So I kind of look like I have a plum on the end of my thumb. And next, you're gonna hold it in your hand, or if you don't want to hold it in your hand, you can put it on the tabletop. I like to hold mine in my hand because then I get like a nice round bottom, and if I want to flatten the bottom later, I can put it on my tabletop and flatten it. So you're gonna push your thumb into your 4 fingers, and then you're gonna turn and push or pinch, and that's why it's a pinch pot. So I'm pinching my fingers and my thumbs together. It's kind of hard to see what I'm doing. and turning, pinching and turning, pinching and turning. Okay. I'm gonna keep doing that and keep moving this clay around in a circle in my hand. As I'm pinching and turning, I'm also going to start to do like this pulling motion up with my thumb. So I'm taking my thumb and I'm pulling the walls up. I'm just really being careful not to make this top rim right here too thin. This part is exposed to the air, so it's going to dry out a lot faster. So you just have to be careful. So I'm pulling this clay, and as I'm pulling the clay up to my rim, it's also compressing it. And it's making all those clay particles really line up, get nice and smooth on the inside. These nesting bowls, you know, they can be like little food prep bowls in your kitchen. After we get them all fired in the kiln and glazed, everything is safe, you know, to use in the dishwasher, in your kitchen, in the microwave if you really want to. So I'm just turning and I'm pulling that clay up the side of my piece. My goal is to get a really even consistency in the thickness all the way. It'll help it dry nice and even. Okay, I can also like flip it upside down and I can start feeling like, how is my thickness down here if I need to do any pinching with my thumb on the outside and my fingers on the inside. And pinch pots, you know, you shouldn't take too long doing them just because the clay will dry out and it will start to crack. I would say if you want to work on each one for no more than 10 minutes, you know, and it's really up to you as to how fussy you want to get with what happens with the clay as you're pinching it and pulling it, because you will see cracks develop if you don't want those. You know, just gently rub over the clay with your finger and smooth out those cracks. You don't need to add water at this point. The clay is really moist. So you can just smooth out those outside cracks if you want. If you've developed any cracks along this rim, you can just take your finger and just carefully smooth out those cracks as well. Or you can keep them. It's up to you. I can also set it down. I'm going to see if it's going to sit level since I'm going to use it for something. I don't want it to be like all crooked. So I can set it on the table and I can just give it a little tap to give it a flat bottom. And then I can just check back in with my thickness, do a little pulling up on the edges again, do some smoothing. I just find pinch pots so relaxing to make. You know, just because it's only your hands and the clay, and you can decide how far the clay will stretch, how thick you want to leave it. If you want parts to be rough or smooth. I have a finished one that I did, and you can see how different they can become when you start adding textures that are found around the house. And I can flip it over so you can see. So I made all these textures with things that were just in different drawers of my house. One of them was just with a pen the tip of the pen just to make really small circles. Another one was just a pencil, an unsharpened pencil. Some of the other ones were the end of a fork, just pressing in. And the order that I did mine was, I did my first little one to get the size, and then set that one aside, and I started on my medium one. Again, rolling into a ball, smoothing out some of those cracks. And then starting my pinch pot again. But after I was done with my third one, then my first one was ready for me to put all these textures in. If you don't want to put your textures in right away and you want to just do all the 3 nesting bowls first, that's fine. You can do that. I would just go ahead and get a grocery bag and put them all, nest them all together, and just put the pieces, put your bowls all in the grocery bag for the evening if you want to come back to it and work it on the next day, and then it'll be ready to work on. It'll still be soft enough, but it won't get, too dried out where you can't add any textures to it. You can also take a nature hike outside and see what you can find. There's plenty of pine cones or acorns. I don't know, what are these? What way am I going here? These little gum tree balls, all those things can create different textures on your pinch pot. When you're adding your textures, you just need to make sure that you have your hand supporting the clay in the back. So you can see this, I just pinched this one, so it's a little soft right now. So it's kind of sticking back on itself. That's why you would want to wait until it got a little bit harder, a little more firm, so it can be not so sticky and so it doesn't deform your pinch pot. And that stage of pottery is called leather hard. For those of you who have had classes with me, you know the stages of pottery. And leather hard is the stage that we trim, the stage that we put our textures in, and you should still be able to, poke your fingernail in it when it's leather hard, and you can make a divot. And it feels if you feel it, it feels sort of like a leather belt. That's how you know it's leather hard. You can also really do a lot of smoothing at the leather hard stage if you wanted to get any more of that stuff. Sorry, and I just found out I was out of the camera shot. So, and here are the other ones that I did. It's really totally up to you. How much time you want to spend doing textures, how smooth you want to get these. It's really endless. So I'm going to nest all mine back together, and I'm going to show you one more time doing the pinch pot with my medium-sized one. And then I'm just gonna go over some really quick tips of how, if we have clay that got too dried out, how we can reuse it. Because all this clay in your bag, you can use all of it until it's all the way gone. If it gets too dry, or if you decide that you don't like how your pinch pot looks, we can add it to some water and wedge it, and we can reuse it again. So until it's fired, we can still keep reusing it and reusing it. If you have a piece that you're ready to put aside because you're done with it and you want me to fire it, and when we reopen, we'll get everything fired and glazed. You can just get a box, like a packing box, like a shipping box, any kind of box, or just find a safe space in your house to put it, and just let them all dry out in the air. And then when they're completely dry, they're called bone dry, and that is when they are at their most fragile. So if they're bone dry, you just want to have a really safe spot for them. You don't want to play with them too much anymore, because that's really when they can crack. And when they're bone dry and they crack, we really can't fix them. We can soak them in water and turn them into wet clay again, but we can't fix them. Okay, so I'm just working on my medium-sized one. I want to keep in mind that I want these to nest. So I'm gonna take my little one and, oh, it's not gonna fit yet. So I know I need to get a little bit wider when I'm working this clay out. I also want to keep in mind, don't get my rim too thin, because that's the part that dries out the fastest. So I want to keep a little thickness in that rim so I have time to work on it later. Okay, so I'm just pinching and pulling up my walls. And really, these hand building lessons can be adapted to any age. So if you got a bag of clay, try doing it with your little kids. You can help them do the pinch pot part. They can help you do the texture part. And we'll also be doing some other lessons that are not just pinch pots, but a pinch pot is just a really basic, good technique to have in your toolbox when you are working with clay. It really allows you to just get used to the material and know how far you can push it, know what it does, know how it dries out, get used to the plasticity of it. Okay, so I'm looking like my opening is really thin, like really narrow. I don't think that this is gonna fit in. Okay, so I'm gonna use the top of my table to press down, and I'm just gonna start stretching out my diameter of my opening so my other bowl will fit inside. And just by pushing the clay into where it needs to go, I'm really like pushing with my thumb against the clay into my hand. I'm really doing a lot of compressing right now, which is really a good way to make the clay nice and strong. Just compressing all that together. And you see I'm working fairly quickly. You don't have to work this fast, but just watch the dryness of your clay too. And I have to thank my son who is helping me do all these videos with all his equipment and his microphone and his time. So hopefully everyone enjoys them, and while we're social distancing, this gives you a little bit of art in your life, a little bit of calm. It's really nice to just sit down at a table with clay in your hand and just focus only on the clay. If your mind wanders, just try to come back and really look at what the clay is doing. Think about what your hands are doing in relationship to the clay. All right, so I'm starting to get a better fit. I like my pinch pots to look a little rustic. You know, they're handmade. They're supposed to look like your fingers were in them and pinching them and touching them. So I'm gonna stop with the medium one right now. I might come back to it to clean it up a little bit. But for now I'm gonna stop, and I'm gonna show you if I make a mistake and I decide I don't like something that I made, how I can use that clay again and not run into any problems with like air bubbles or pieces that are more dry than others. So let's say I, put my thumb all the way through my pinch pot because I just wasn't paying attention. And then I pinched and like it just turned into like a big sloppy mess because my daughter stepped on the cat's tail and scared me, or someone needed my help and I had to leave my stuff out and it got really dried out. So, and I just wasn't done with it, but I just can't work it anymore because it got too dry. So what I can do is I can just get a bowl of water, and then you're gonna take your clay and just go ahead and just dip it in the water, and then you're gonna put it back in your bag overnight, okay? And what this does is it just allows the clay to just rehydrate, and just equalize like the moisture with all the clay that's in the bag. And then the next day I can come back and I would have dipped that clay in water and taken it out of my bag, but it's still like a sloppy, weird shape, and I need to put it into more of like a round ball to start my pinch pots. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna wedge your clay, and it's best probably not to do it on your what is this, your cloth. It's probably best to do it like on a harder surface, and the best place to do it would be obviously on the tables I have in my studio, but you can do it on a placemat if you have one. You can do it like if you have a cutting board that you don't like, a wood cutting board that you don't really like that much, that you can wash off really well, or just really any kind of cutting board that it's not going to stick back on too much, or you can always just use like a placemat. So I would work it in my hands just a little bit to get some of that gooey like water off. You don't want a lot of slip on it. And then you're gonna wedge this piece of clay. So wedging is kind of like kneading dough, but you don't want to wedge air bubbles into it. Like when you knead dough, you want to put those air bubbles in it. So we want to just gently push forward and pull back, and we don't want to put a lot of like wrinkles in our clay, a lot of bends in our clay. So I'm just pushing forward really, I don't know if you can see me. I'm just pushing forward and I'm pulling back, pushing forward, pulling back. And actually what I would suggest is maybe I can put a link to a wedging video that has a bigger piece of clay that you can like see really the technique. But you're going to be working with a smaller piece of clay, so that's why I'm kind of showing you with this teeny weeny small piece of clay. But so I'm just gently, what I'm doing is I'm pushing forward and then rolling the clay back, only maybe like a 1/4 of an inch. I'm rolling back, pushing forward, rolling back, pushing forward, rolling back. So you can see it made like a spiral thing in my clay, and hopefully if I did it right, I didn't wedge any air bubbles in there. And then I can take this piece of clay and reuse it. Now I can put it back in that ball shape, and it's all ready for another pinch pot. Or, we're also going to be doing some slab rolling, so I could then roll it into a slab. So some things that I used out of my kitchen was, you know, to do texture. So basically anything you can find, you can poke it in to do a texture. Also, if you have a rolling pin, that's going to be helpful for some upcoming videos. If you don't have a rolling pin, we'll just be throwing some clay around into a slab, so we'll show you that too. But you can also, I mean, anything, you know, I used, let me see, I'll get this guy out. For this texture along the rim, I just found, you know, a skewer out of our drawer. And I just took the skewer and just went all along the rim. It's a little time consuming, but you know, we have a lot of time. So, the pinch pots I did today were a little tighter. You could also, if you wanted to, you know, think of other pinch pot shapes that you've seen places. These are nesting ones still, but they're a lot looser. You know, it looks very much more organic than the ones that I just did. You can also, if you have a paper clip in your house, which I don't have mine with me right now, but I'll show you in another video. If you don't like the undulation in the rim, you know, you can take a paper clip and you can use the paper clip like I'm using this skewer, and you can just make this top part a lot more flat. Like if you don't like all that undulation, so you would actually be cutting through the clay with the tip of your paper clip. And I'm gonna get a needle tool. Tip of this would be similar to if you opened a paper clip, and you could just take that open paper clip and just carefully, you know, level out the top if you really were worried about having like a really level top. And then you can go back and just try to really even it all out. It just depends on how precise you want to get. Okay. And then I can use my fingers to smooth. If you feel like the edges are getting too dry, you know, you can dip in the water and do some smoothing if you want to. I wouldn't put too much water on your fingers just because it gets like really, really too slippy. And sometimes that can lead to like a little bit more cracking the more you mess with it. Okay, so I finished 2 pinch pots and showed you some quick ways to make some textures. I'm gonna put my extra clay, always store it in my bag. If I want to come back to these pinch pots and add more textures or adjust anything, I'm going to find a grocery bag to carefully wrap them up in. Okay. If I'm all finished for today, I'm gonna wash all my tools. Okay. I'm gonna wipe down my placemat with a sponge. Set it aside for the next time I'm ready to work in clay. I'm gonna fold up my towel. If it's really dirty, you can wash it. If it's not that dirty, you can just, you know, fold it up all together. Put your pieces on top and tuck it away in a spot so it's ready to be worked on next time. If you have any questions about this lesson, please send me an email, julie@julieberkowitzceramics.com, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Our next lesson will be pinch pot hollow forms, and then The third lesson will be a slab mug, and then the fourth lesson will be a slab vase. But anyway, thank you and have fun playing in clay.